welcome back to Interview with Scientist series. Today we have Sammie Walker Herrera, who is joined us as a speaker today. She is the manager for integrated partnership at the University of Florida's Career Connection Center. She also served as the embedded career coach to the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Today we will talk with Sammie about her career transition, her tips and tricks about CV, LinkedIn auditing, and her secrets. Thank you, Sammie, for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. Even interview for a scientist with a scientist is really cool, and I count as a social scientist.
Great. Yeah, every scientist are welcome. So, can you tell us about your background, like your educational background?
Yeah. So I went to high school and middle school and elementary. All of those were in South Texas, McAllen, Texas,
Yes.
and I went to college at 17 and moved up north from Texas to Pennsylvania. So I went
Okay.
to school in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon University, where I studied psychology and Hispanic studies. From that experience, I was highly involved as a student. I was working in the Career Center. I was a resident assistant. I was a research assistant for one semester. Didn't love it. And let's see, I was in the marching band. I worked at the local psychiatric hospital as a translator. There's just a lot of different things I was trying out to get a
Yeah.
more of a sense of my own career path, different ways to build out experience, meet new folks. And from that experience, I decided that okay, I really want to focus more on this career coaching thing. So I went and got my master's at Slippery Rock University of
Okay.
Pennsylvania. It's about an hour north of Pittsburgh, in higher education, so in student affairs in higher education, where not only can you work in career coaching, right? But you can work in multicultural and diversity affairs, which I've done,
Yes.
in orientation, in admissions, enrollment, all those different areas of the collegiate or university experience that folks experience outside of the classroom.
Okay. That sounds awesome. So I see that
Thank
you
you.
have a degree in CCSP. So what is CCSP?
Yeah, so that is a certificate, so or a
Okay.
certification. And so that is through the National Career Development Association.
Okay.
CCSP stands for Certified Career Services Professional, and that is a 120-hour course that
Okay.
culminates in a four-part essay exam
Okay.
to say, okay, I have the competencies, I've learned a lot about how to provide direct career services.
Okay. That sounds very interesting. So when did you decide and why did you decide to become a career coach?
Yeah. Well, working at the Career Center at Carnegie Mellon was actually my first job ever. And I really loved it. Like, even looking back, I think about the first time I ever like hosted a presentation by myself
Yep.
and how nervous I was before the presentation, but how confident I was during the presentation. And that happens to me all the time. Anytime I host a webinar, anytime I host any type of training, I'm a little nervous right before, and then I just
Yes.
get into the flow of it during. I love improv. Like, I have never taken like an improv class, but I like improvising a lot of the things I say, especially because then I get to add new information, not just go off kind of like a script based on that specific topic. And so
Yes.
I really found myself just really feeling confident. I didn't realize how much I loved being an expert in something.
Okay.
And it's kind of hard to be an expert in anything when you have a bachelor's in psychology, right? You're still getting a sense of like all the general parts of
Yes.
psychology, where you fit in, what aligns most with your own like personal philosophy, your own experiences. And so luckily I had that experience in my master's program, but not my bachelor's, which makes sense. Most folks, they don't know or realize that there's 40 plus areas of
Mm-hmm.
psychology when most colleges have like 2 to 6,
Okay.
right? So you don't know what your exact fit is in that sense. So I really loved it. I felt like I came out of my shell. I loved being an educator. I loved training other peer mentors. And in my final year, I did a lot with building relationships with residents' life, so that when we had our programs, that resident hall directors or resident assistants would bring us in and we could have more outreach to students. So I really loved it. By the time I was a senior, I was like, oh, I should get a job in something. And I was trying to figure out how I could potentially be a career coach. And higher education was a big eye opener for me, because I got a sense that, oh, okay, I don't have to just specialize in one thing. If I really find a passion in this other area of higher education, I can build out my experiences and they're all transferable.
Okay. So yeah, as you mentioned, transferable skills are really important when we are looking for a career change. Uh,
Definitely.
so my next question to you is, people are trying to shift from academics to industry. So what are your top tricks or points that you want to give out to people who are looking for this transition?
Yeah, I think one thing I've been talking about quite a bit recently, and I think can be really helpful for folks, is the sense that you don't have to go all or nothing to
Mm-hmm.
test something out. And what I mean by that is often when folks are trying to get a sense for something, there might be one part that is so awesome you're like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it, I'm just
Yeah.
going to do it. And sometimes that can end up being commitment, but sometimes that can also be overcommitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
There might be parts to that experience that you really don't like, or you don't really get a sense of, oh, the part that you enjoy is 20% of that job and 80% are some other things, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of ways to test out parts of your career, and of course informational interviewing and networking is just a part of it.
Yes.
That includes when you have that conversation with folks and ask them about what does your career path look like? What are some things that you know about the industry? What's advice you have for a young person or someone in my experience or someone who is in your shoes who's doing this new thing, right?
Yes.
Those count as experiences, and you get a sense in and also a relationship over time to have more
Yes.
meetings and ask, okay, this part that I love, right, presenting in front of people, how often do you get to do something like that? So then you get a sense of, okay, does this work or does this optimize for a balance? Because there's no perfect job,
Yes.
right? But you can make a job more perfect for you based on something known as job crafting.
Yeah.
So that's just that sense of like, okay, you're in a role, but you get to work strategically with your supervisor, your manager, other folks to make sure that it aligns more with the things that you want to do. So
Definitely.
that's one idea, is testing some things out. So even if you're able to job shadow, right?
Yeah.
You get to follow someone in their day, even if it's via Zoom, right? Like attend a meeting or something like that. Like take a short like course on LinkedIn Learning or Coursera just to get to, like the base of it. You don't want to only just be doing like readings, courses,
Mm-hmm.
academics,
Mm-hmm.
going to a master's program, because you want to gain more experience.
Okay. So yeah, job shadowing is really important if it's possible to do that.
Yeah,
Because
definitely. And I think a lot of folks, for example, like in Parag Mahanti's grad grid, like would be more than
yes.
happy to offer some type of option, or even, for example, like a simulation, right?
Yes.
Like if it were some like, here's like a simulated half day, this is what I would be doing. Like
Yeah.
if folks can go through a day in their life, or even like highlight like what their schedules look like, I think that could be really helpful for people.
Definitely. So, what are some of the common mistakes that people are making when trying to transition?
Mistakes people are making when they're trying to transition. One of the biggest ones, and this is one of the hardest ones as well, is not knowing yourself well enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are questions like, tell me about yourself, right? There are, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about you? Or, hey, I'm going to introduce you to this person.
Yes.
What do you want me to say in this email, right? And not knowing yourself, one of the symptoms of that is that you end up not feeling as confident because you
Yes.
don't know yourself. However, it is a really hard thing to do because sometimes there are parts of ourselves we don't like,
Yeah.
right? And we kind of have to go through that, and in a non-judgmental space, which is hard to do, is just look at the parts of ourselves and accept them as they
Yes.
are.
Yes.
So different ways to get to know ourselves, right? Often what people will do is they'll do career assessments, right? Okay, now I know my strengths, I know my skills, I know this value from this assessment, and those are helpful.
Yes.
But often we also have to dig a little bit deeper, right? What are the things that make me light up? What are the things that I didn't really enjoy doing, and
Mm-hmm.
why do I enjoy them? And for
Yeah.
example, even like that idea of giving out presentations, right?
Yes.
I love giving presentations, but like, what about it? So I think one of the toughest things, and one of the mistakes that folks make as well, is they go by, well, I don't like these things generally, and I
Mm-hmm.
like these things generally. But you
Yeah.
have to dig deeper. Like, what do you love about giving presentations? Is it about being in front of people?
Mm-hmm.
Is it about the education part? Is it the fact that you're the one who built the slides and you thought that was cool?
Yeah.
Is it that, this is a networking conference and you specifically like being in networking conferences? When we really break down what are the features of the things that I like,
Yes.
then it's so much easier to create a career brand around that.
Yeah. Definitely. That's really important. So let's move on to CV and cover letters. So I have seen like people, even when I've started job hunting, I've had a 4-page CV which I sent out
Mm-hmm.
to recruiters, and I never got a response. But once I skimmed it to 2 pages and made it a resume, people start
Mm-hmm.
responding. So,
Great.
what are some of the key things that one should condense and one should highlight in the CV?
Yeah, that is a really great question, and I have helped folks like let's reduce it, right?
Yep.
I think one thing that just changes the game regarding like CV to resume
Yep.
is starting over. What I mean by that is having a blank document and that is your resume, not copying and pasting things from your CV immediately, because there are some formatting changes, right? And so I would start over in that sense, right? And even before you have your resume document open, maybe have a piece of paper that you're writing on, right? To say, okay, I've read through several job descriptions. I know what industry I'm going into, right? That is the most strategic. However, if you're just making your resume and you don't yet know what job industry you're going into, that's okay too. But thinking about what are the main things I want to feature that highlight my skills and accomplishments? Like skills, accomplishments in the context of like results and numbers, not just like accomplishment for like that was cool and I enjoyed that, right? Which is helpful, and you can tell stories about that for sure.
Yes.
But your resume, you want to make sure are things that signal value to any company or hiring manager or recruiter who's reading it and says, oh, they did this thing, I think they can do that here.
Okay.
Because recruiters, hiring managers, those HR, for example, they have a limited amount of time. Just like we have limited amount of time. There have been times that many of us as academics, right, have been on job search processes or have reviewed interview materials or resume materials or even reviewed, let's say, a bunch of data. And you're like, wow, it'd be really nice if I didn't have as much data to review at this point, right?
Yes.
And so for that, you're trying to make their job easier. Instead of them taking the time and energy to advocate for you, you need to advocate for yourself so much that it's just a checkbox of yeses. And then, if need be, they can advocate for you toward the end when they already get to know you because of networking, because of your interviewing.
Yes. So yeah, for while moving out of academics, I had a big problem like condensing things. I did a lot of achievements. So how do I condense that? I had 20 publications. So how do I condense? Do I need to show them? And I think industry doesn't care about how many publications you have. Maybe you should mention 20 publications. That's it for most of the positions.
Yeah. So one thing I think is really helpful is when you do condense your publications and presentations, right?
Yeah.
You can have a section that's like selected publications and presentations, or like a separate one for each, right?
Yes.
And only include the ones that are really related to the content area of the organization, right? However, one thing that's becoming way more common for folks, especially like folks with a lot more experience, so of course folks with PhDs or folks who have like 5 to 7 plus years of experience in industry, is having a professional summary.
Yes.
And that's right at the top of your resume, underneath like your name and your contact information, for example. Summary, professional summary. You have about 3 to 5 bullet points where you kind of give that overview of like the biggest accomplishments that you've had that kind of transcend or like connect all the dots regarding a lot of your experiences. So for example, those 20 publications, those probably over a lot of time. Those could have been over many institutions, right? And so that can be one of the bullet points. And of course, you don't want to say like publish 20 publications, right? First off, you're saying publish too often. But second, you want to highlight what the specific skills are regarding them with that, right? So contributed to nationally and internationally renowned journals through 20 publications using like technical writing, like focusing on, okay, technical writing is a skill, collaborating with teammates is a skill, data processing or analysis is a specific skill. If there was a specific award that went with that, or one of those journals was like, for example, like Nature, right? Like one of the most prestigious ones, you can highlight a few of those details that maybe some folks would know. And that transforms it to like, wow, this person can use these skills, can be accepted by peers and by experts in the field. That means they probably can write.
Yes.
So that's great.
Definitely. So I have heard this misconception, like you can use the same CV resume for different jobs. So how true is that?
That's a really great question. So I think you can use the same resume for very similar roles in similar industries. For example, like you can have your content marketing resume. And what that means is you've looked at enough job descriptions or LinkedIn profile descriptions or talked to enough people to get a sense of what are the industry keywords. And of course, you can tweak it just a little bit if you want to make sure it's tied more to that specific job description. But you feel confident and comfortable that like, okay, this resume is tailored to that industry and that type of role, right? And so if it's content marketing in healthcare, maybe again, like you want to make sure that you're not applying to too many different industries or too many different roles, because it's just going to be really confusing, especially once you get interviews, right?
Yeah.
You have your tailored resume, you feel confident, you're interested in all these roles, but now you're getting interviews from all these different types of roles. It's kind of hard to balance, and you have to double check some of those things.
Yes.
So if you know, like for a couple of weeks, okay, I'm only applying for roles in the healthcare industry, and I'm applying for these type of roles, content marketing, I'm applying for data analysis, and I'm applying for UX researcher roles, right? Okay, well, here's my UX resume, here's my content marketing resume, here's that other one that I mentioned. And you can feel a lot more confident and not feeling like, okay, well, every single one has to be so tailored, because you'll notice trends and patterns over them, which is good, because if folks are direct competitors, they're not going to have completely different keywords, right? They're going to need to use the words that optimize for folks trying to find them, but the way they talk about their brand is going to be different.
Yes. And how obsolete are cover letters right now?
That's a really great question. So cover letters, the main thing about cover letters, right, is the sense that someone reads it.
Yes.
That's the most crucial thing. It's not just about like flexing your writing or feeling like you got that PDF to load in correctly, right? Now, if you're applying online and they require a cover letter, you got to do it, right? Because then it's not even going to accept your application, right?
Yes.
Some have an optional cover letter option. I would say do it, just because that's going to put you in a space that's way different than the folks who did not include the cover letter, therefore did not put in the same level of effort. However, of course, for any online application, you want to have already made some connections in that organization, know some folks in the industry, perhaps been referred, which makes it easier for your whole application to be reviewed, right? Including your resume and cover letter. But if you know who the hiring manager is, someone from HR, you have a direct contact, it's okay to send them an email saying, hi, I just applied for the role in this position. And you can either put the cover letter in the body of the email, so that's just like, it's there, they're reading it, or you can attach it, but you want to still have like a body of text that like explains who you are, what your interests are, some of those kind of base things. And you also want to have a really great email subject line.
Okay.
And that's just for any type of thing, right? Like you don't want it to be like, read my cover letter. They're gonna be like, what is this? You don't want it to come off super spammy, right? Like so that the spam filters see it and they're like, I don't know what this is about. Like you don't want to make it seem like you're selling something, right? But if you're referred by someone, you can say referred by this person, attached cover letter, or application submitted for insert role, right? It just makes it clear of like, oh, what's this connected to? Okay, this is not a spam email. Let me check it out. And so that's the main thing with cover letters is a lot of folks are saying they're outdated. However, a cover letter is one of the best ways to really show your personality, show your interests, highlight your crucial skills in a way that's like expands upon your resume, which is super important, because I notice when I talk to a lot of folks, they say, I wish that I got the interview, because if I had the interview, I know I could get the role because I could explain everything a lot more than I could my resume. But your cover letter is that bridge that can really push your application toward that interview phase.
Yes. And I think I can relate to what you said just now, because I always felt like, oh, maybe if they gave me a first chance, I could have gotten a job. So let's move to the last part, the LinkedIn. How important is LinkedIn? People who are not active on LinkedIn, should they have an active profile on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so usually how I break down LinkedIn is there's the profile, which is pretty much like a digital resume, and then there's LinkedIn, the social media, the social networking site, right? A lot of folks who, let's say they started their LinkedIn 8 to 10 years ago, right? LinkedIn was very different then. It wasn't owned by Microsoft then. Yesterday, I was able to add my pronouns formally on the site, right? Like there are consistent changes happening, not only with the settings, but the functionality of LinkedIn. Is that LinkedIn used to just be only like this professional site where you updated your resume once a year or every 6 months or every time you had a publication or something like that, right? But now it's a social networking site. So when you think about that in that way, how often are you on Twitter? Right? How often are you on Facebook? How often are you watching things like, or new TikTok dances, right? So that's probably every day, multiple times a day. And it doesn't have to be like that. But when you switch your mindset to, oh, this needs to be more active for me to get the benefits of it. Just like
Yes.
you're not on Twitter once a year, and then
Yes.
you're like, well, Twitter's not helpful, right? It's
So
that
well.
same like framework. And so what you want to do is feel more comfortable in your voice. And often the way you feel more comfortable in your voice is exercising your voice to become more confident. I know for me, in writing posts, like I started writing on LinkedIn, like the posts and whatnot, starting like about August of 2020. And it just made me feel more comfortable in my writing. I realized that people want to know more about my personality. They want to know more about the way I think about resumes, right?
Yes.
So I don't write about them in just like a generic way that you can Google, right? I write them in my own voice or from my own experiences or stories. Storytelling is huge
Yes.
on LinkedIn. Talking about just like the things that we go through during our lives, the ways that they interact, not only our career development, but our life growth as well, are really popular. And so even if you're just reading on LinkedIn, right, you get a lot of information about, okay, this person can be a cool contact. Oh, this person had this experience. And honestly, a lot of folks feel like, okay, I need to post every single day on LinkedIn, multiple days, write all this new original content. And first, you probably have some content that's already out there that you can repurpose. So that's great. And second, honestly, the biggest engagement strategy on LinkedIn is commenting.
Yeah.
If you comment on 2 posts a day, up to five or more posts a day or so, people are starting to see you come out there. They're going to see that you're more active on the profile. They're going to see that you have some valuable things to say, right? As long as you say more than, good post, thanks for sharing, stuff like that, right? Things more in depth, or even sharing your stories. The cool thing about LinkedIn comment is it can be this long if you want it to be, right? You can write a treatise in there if you want. And folks notice that. They notice that when you are really putting some value out there. And so that's that social networking component. But of course, like your profile, that sense of an active or fully updated profile, that's something that can be really helpful for you. And the LinkedIn algorithm, just like any algorithm, takes time to shift. And so if you're making a pivot, it's really important to start updating your LinkedIn even regularly with those new keywords with the new volunteer experiences or other experiences you have, because then LinkedIn will catch up. They'll be like, oh, okay, this person's kind of shifting. If you change your industry on there, that can be helpful, right? So that's in the drop down in one of the settings. You can change your industry from higher education to research or medical devices or finance or something like that. And that'll definitely help you get some more eyes on your profile, like related to folks who might be decision makers in those industries you're interested in.
Definitely. And one more thing that I wanted to hear about is, how do you make connections on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Networking.
How do you make connections? Yeah, for you. Let's see. How do you make connections on LinkedIn? So there's a bunch of different ways. And so I'll give a couple of my top ways. The first one is similarity principle. Folks are more likely to connect with you if you put in the effort to say, this is how we're similar, and I would love to learn from you because I find you valuable. So first off, that similarity just helps. The second thing is saying, wow, I looked over your materials, or I noticed you're doing these things. You impress me. So like in a way, that's a compliment too. Like people love compliments, right? And I would love to learn from you 20 to 30 minutes or so, which also makes it a little bit of, it's not too much of an investment of time, right? So that's one of those things. So if you use an alumni tool on LinkedIn, if you really read through their profile, there's one time I went to a webinar related to student affairs professionals, like in their networking, and a lot of the folks were dropping their LinkedIns in the Zoom chat as one does. And I added folks and I connected with them and I sent a message like, hey, I'm connecting with you from this webinar. But before I sent them the message, I really read through their profile to see if we had anything in common or see if there's anything I was really interested in learning about. I think one thing people do is they just add people after an event and then they forget to check their profile, or they forget to really like have a more meaningful connection. And one person I noticed on his profile in the volunteer section, so that's like toward the bottom of the profile, right? He had done a volunteer abroad in Bolivia. I was like, okay, that's really cool. And it's from this nonprofit based in Pittsburgh that I was involved with. And I had also been to Bolivia on volunteering abroad. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. We were like in the same type of experience. And I looked at the dates and they were January 2018. And that's when I was there. And I was like, So I went back to his school and I was like, that was the other group that was there with us for a few days. And then I remembered him. So when I sent my message, I was like, hey, it's so cool seeing you, that you're in higher education doing this thing. by the way, we both were in Bolivia at this time. Like I was with the Slippery Rock group.
Yes.
And when we messaged back, it was just like immediate connection. And like we immediately had a call pretty soon afterward because that similarity was so striking
Yes.
that it really helped us like foster that relationship, even though we hadn't like seen each other in like 3 or 4 years.
Of course. And yeah, making a deep connection is really important because I know people just read the headlines. For example, you're a career coach in XYZ, so and they'll just add you. They don't go through the whole profile. So that is really important because that can help you make or break the connection.
Yeah. I think a couple other ways to make connections as well is if you're commenting on folks' posts and they start noticing you, they're like, hey, Sammie is out here and doing kind of something similar to me. Like it's more likely that they'll add you or they'll feel comfortable with you adding them, right? Hey, you've been putting out really awesome content. It's helped me be more reflective. You know, I wrote a post that was kind of similar to what you wrote because I felt like the topic really inspired me. I'd love to connect. It's more likely, right? Because they already have that familiarity with you. And that's one of the reasons why people don't add people, right? Is they just have absolutely no idea who you are.
Yes.
And now if you're in the same industry or you have a similar title, okay, maybe they'll add you because they only add folks from the industry, right?
Yes.
But using that personalized messaging feature in the connection to say like, hey, like I really enjoyed your content. This is something that's really helped me in my job. Like I've applied this advice and this is one of the things that happened. People love that. That's one of the biggest compliments you can give a person is they give advice and then you take it and then you tell them what happened after that advice. That's one of the greatest things that people love. And so that can definitely be a great way to connect, right? Is just getting to know more folks in those industries by participating in their posts, by participating on LinkedIn, and then they have that familiarity with you.
Yes.
The last one I'll say is if you see someone's talk, right? I'm in a course called Blast Off to Stellar Slides where I can make presentation slides the best. And I've noticed that there's some guest lectures there. And so I was watching a couple of the guest lectures and I was like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to connect with someone. Hi, I watched your guest lecture in this course. I love that you talked about this thing. I'd love to talk about it in more depth.
Yep.
Like if you watch the recordings of a networking conference, right, or any type of scientific or any other type of career conference, right, you can say, hey, I saw you're doing these things. I really liked this part. I'd love to connect. Because folks, when they put themselves in that public position of I'm an expert and I talked about this for a long while, they're totally cool with connecting.
Definitely. Making a personalized connection, sending a personalized connection really helps.
Yeah. And reminding them like, hey, you did this public facing thing.
Yes.
Add me.
Yes. No, I really noticed that. Like if I send just a random just a connection request, people might or might not accept it depending on the level of busyness they have. If I write a personalized message, 99% chances are they will accept it. Or they will respond to that message and talk. Even if they don't accept it, they will try to build that connection and talk to me.
Yeah, and it can hurt. It can actually hurt you if you're just kind of spamming out connections. The reason for this is if people like consistently click like I don't know this person or they keep like rejecting you, it's less likely that like LinkedIn will let you keep sending out connection requests.
Yes, definitely. So any last tips for people who are trying to transition?
Yeah, let's see. Definitely, especially for students, of course, use your career center or use your graduate career services. Even more undergraduate focused career services, they either they still have valuable things that you can learn from or different perspectives that you can learn from, or they might have a dedicated person who has a little bit more focus working with grad students. And so you can ask, hey, do you happen to have a person who knows about these things more, so that you can get that support as well. I think too, pausing let me just learn everything as much as possible and go into analysis paralysis. Let me just, I need to read one more paper about this. I need to take one more course. I need to take one more LinkedIn learning about this to feel confident and comfortable. It's just to really stop and do a little bit more of that self-reflection. Again, not only of strengths and skills, but okay, these are the types of things I like to do. Okay, now that I know more detailed versions of things I like to do, when I network with folks, I can say, hey, the things that I really love to do are X, Y, and Z that are very specific.
Yeah.
is there an opportunity for me to be able to do that in this field in some way? Or do
Yes.
you know of fields where that's easier to be able to do those things? And folks are really generous with sharing more things about their network.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, that's the power of weak ties, is if you only ask your friends, the people you know really well, about the different
Yes.
opportunities that are out there, most likely you already know about them as well. But when you start connecting with folks you don't quite know as well, or you have a little bit of connection with, but they're still confident and comfortable in telling you about their own experiences, it's more likely you'll hear about different opportunities. And
Yes.
then more likely you can potentially get referred, and you don't have to go through the full online application and worry about if they're reading your cover letter or not.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for your time and sharing all the nitty gritties of job hunting. I really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing your secrets.
Of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time to being on the Addictive Brain, and
Thank
shout
you.
out to all of our social scientists out there.
Thank you.